Hej då.
Ja, hej och välkomna tillbaka till kanalen återigen. Ikväll så har vi ett program om nikotin och lite häftig forskning som har kommit fram. Jag har med mig min kompis Marie Jakobsson som har varit schysst och textat de här klippen som vi ska se. Vad känner du till om nikotin?
Ja, det här var ju en helt ny erfarenhet av mig. För mig heter det. Så att jag tycker det är helt fascinerande.
Ja.
Det är ju liksom en universal medicin, känns det som.
Jag blev väldigt förvånad över det här sambandet mellan nikotin och niacin. Vi ska se på det mer sen, men vi har ju ett väldigt viktigt vitamin som kroppen kan producera som heter vitamin B3. Och en del forskare de tillverkar till och med niacinet ifrån nikotin. Så att man fattar att det inte bara är den här bilden som tobaksbolagen har försökt få fram att nikotin är något jätteberoendeframkallande, utan de gjorde ju faktiskt en stor studie på Harvard 2015 och man kunde inte göra djur beroende av nikotin.
Nej, precis.
Så det skulle ju vara spännande om man forskade på det här med nikotin utanför cigaretter och liksom när man förbränner. Men jag tänker vi kör igång här, och det är också en grej med receptorer i hjärnan. Varför har vi nikotinreceptorer i hjärnan? Det är ungefär som de här cannabinoiderna, receptorerna som man har i hjärnan. Man undrar ju då, är det meningen att vi ska få nikotin som liksom viktiga näringsämnen? Men vi kör igång med en gång här.
Okay, so Tucker Carlson just announced that he's releasing his own line of nicotine patches.
This is Alp. It's America's latest nicotine pouch, American Lip Pillow. I double up. I put 2 tins in at once. And I do it the traditional way.
Yeah, what's that?
With my tongue.
In your opinion, are there any other benefits to nicotine patches besides, weaning you off of nicotine?
Great question. And nicotine is one of those supplements, I'm going to call it that way, in which it's got a enormously bad reputation. Simply because traditional way of taking in nicotine is either through general tobacco products like chew or smoking. And there's so many other compounds when you ingest or take in nicotine that way that it's hard to understand what the pros or the cons are when it comes to nicotine in itself. And so nicotine, though, is actually biochemically enormously beneficial to an individual. And in fact, I don't even smoke, and I'm wearing a 7 milligram patch right now. And so there's old research, back from the 1980s into the early 1990s, even before you were born, in which they were starting to talk about the benefits of nicotine. But there was a lot of confusion in that research because that's when the nicotine patches were starting to really become popular, and the nicotine there is just pure. But then they were convoluting that research with nicotine from smoking, and you can't make that direct comparison. Now, in 2024, there's a whole new body of research, supporting this. And it's interesting, you may not know it, but your body actually has nicotinic acid receptors in your body. So your body is actually prepared and more than willing to accept nicotine into the system. And one of the biggest examples for this is in the neuro area. You've got all of these nicotinic receptors that actually influence the brain. So you see people with improved cognition from taking nicotine. There's even studies that are showing improvement in for the treatment of early dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Same thing with Parkinson's. And so one of the big things that Tucker Carlson has brought up with prior to him announcing the releasing of the product, he was over in Europe and had this huge back and forth with the journalist over there in Germany. He was talking about how Europe is trying to impose legislation in which you require a prescription in order to get nicotine. And the huge question as to why, especially if everybody views nicotine as a bad thing. Well, no, there's actually huge benefits to it. And one of the most startling things that's coming out right now, and I have to be very careful with my language right now, is there was this thing that occurred back in 2020 to 2021, which caused everybody to get locked down. And there were a lot of people who suffered from an infection which led into a long version of the disease, in which it led to just impaired thought process, impaired cognitive abilities. And there are now new studies that are coming out, peer-reviewed publications showing that by just using these little bad boys, you can actually reverse the long version of that disease. And so this is something I got to ask the question, are they trying to sweep this under the rug, or is it just something which they want to be able to control and monetize so that you just can't go around and just, go and get me the 7 milligram, like this is from Target, right
oh my
here.
God.
It's just like, it was for 2 weeks worth, it's like 20 some dollars. And so periodically I'll go and I'll do a week of this just because I might be feeling a little bit run down, tired and stuff. And this gives me the pep. And then, I purge myself after a week. And then a few weeks later, like if I'm going to be traveling and I'm going to be suffering from jet lag, must-haves for me. So again, this is something that if you're thinking about doing this, go and consult your physician, whether or not that they would be able to go and give you adequate advice on this. But there is, just go into onto PubMed. Yeah, that's a huge resource that I go. These publications that I'm talking about are on PubMed. These are all peer-reviewed, valid science. Go and look at that stuff. And again, it's over the counter. Turn around, give it a shot. If you're just feeling like you're mentally cloudy or something like that, something that you can, at this point in time, still delve into as a individual solution for yourself, that hopefully will take care of the problem. I'm not endorsing smoking or chewing tobacco by any stretch of the imagination. It's these little transdermal patches which are for it. And Tucker, good job in recognizing that this is a solution to a huge problem. So as long as they're affordable, I'll be a buyer.
Mm. Och det känns ju som att vi nästan är menade om vi har liksom receptorer i hjärnan. Att på något sätt är det här meningen att vara våran medicin.
Ja.
Det är häftigt.
Ja, det är det. Verkligen. Alzheimer, covid. Alltså, det är magiskt.
Memory learning och såna här grejer. Men vi kommer stöta på det här många klipp. Men jag tänker vi tar lite grundläggande bara det här med nikotin och niacin då, så man får en liten förklaring kanske hur det här hänger ihop.
Okay, so nicotine is has a molecular structure, and to the body, it's all about molecular structure. It has a molecular structure that's very, very similar, almost exact actually, to what is arguably, and it's hard to say what the most important vitamin is, but an argument could be made that the most important vitamin in the body is vitamin B3, and that's niacin, also known as nicotinic acid. Chemical structure of nicotine and nicotinic acid are very similar. And nicotine, the reason I say nicotine or vitamin B3, niacin, niacinamide, nicotine, nicotinic acid, it's got various names. The reason I say arguably the most important vitamin in the body, because it's the only vitamin, which by definition, vitamins are something the body can't make. Vitamin B3 is the only vitamin that the body will make under deficiency states. That's how important vitamin B3 deficiency is. Dr. Abram Hoffer, who was known as the father of orthomolecular medicine, that is nutritional supplementation, used to use niacin to treat schizophrenia and mental health issues. Deficiencies in niacin are associated with skin problems, digestive problems. Dementia is one of the signs of niacin deficiency states, and mental health issues, as well as ultimately your demise. Niacin deficiency will ultimately kill you. The disease caused by niacin deficiency, by the way, is called pellagra. And while pellagra is an official disease, there are subclinical states of pellagra. That is, they're not bad enough to force you to go to the hospital or go to the doctor or check yourself in somehow, but you may start dealing with mild states like diarrhea, cognitive impairment, rashes, dry skin, wrinkles. All of these can be signs of a subclinical vitamin B3 deficiency. Now, nicotine itself, while it's similar to vitamin B3, also plays another very important role in the nervous system, and that is via what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest nervous system, which uses primarily a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which you may have heard of. Acetylcholine is a very important neurotransmitter for the digestive system, for learning, for skin health, for relaxation. But it turns out that nicotine can actually activate some of the acetylcholine receptors. And this gives nicotine, above and beyond its similarity or analogous benefits to vitamin B3, this gives nicotine even extra potential health benefits. And now nicotine is being studied for its immune modulating effects via its ability to activate this nicotine receptor. And this is why Dr. Artis' work is so exciting. Nicotine is now being used experimentally or researched to help quiet inflammation, quench inflammation down, to activate the immune system, and to suppress abnormal activity of the immune system. Nicotine is being explored for its anti-inflammatory benefits. It's being used experimentally anyway to treat things like rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune diseases. So nicotine, above and beyond its ability to mimic or analogize vitamin B3, nicotinic acid or nicotinamide, it has secondary effects on the nervous system itself by being able to activate this cholinergic or acetylcholine nervous system.
Okay, this is fascinating.
Det är fascinerande.
Och jag har en liten kort video bara som för de som är lite så här biokemiskt lagda, hur molekylstrukturen ser ut, niacin kontra nikotin.
Now, I started to say nicotine, and here's why I started to say that. Here's how that researcher created his niacin. He took this molecule. If there are biochemists out there, some of you may recognize that as nicotine. So this is the niacin. This is common to niacin and nicotine. All he did was oxidate this, and ended up with two oxygen molecules on a carbon there. So he took that ring off. In other words, right there. So this is niacin, and again, he made it from nicotine. So an interesting thought about some of the reasons why nicotine may have such an impact that it does.
Man utrotade ju en folksjukdomen pellagra som var vanligt förr när man förstod det här med niacinets värde och hur man kunde avhjälpa folk liksom. Ja. Men vi kör vidare. Är nikotinet av godo, kan man ju fråga sig.
I have a thought experiment I often suggest, which is what would happen if we put every adult on earth on nicotine patches every day for the rest of their lives? What would happen? Well, I can tell you right away, smoking rates would drop. Nicotine increases focus, attention, and memory, and improves. It's a performance-enhancing drug. That is actually, if you're tested for drugs and you're in the Olympics and there's nicotine in your system, that's fine. Nobody cares. But what else would happen? Parkinson's disease rates would drop about 60% worldwide. And probably Alzheimer's and other aging dementias would drop. And then a whole raft of what are called neurodiversity conditions, symptoms would drop. So here we're talking among adults. We're talking about ADHD and autism and bipolar disorder and Tourette's syndrome and schizophrenia. Rates of epilepsy would drop. Rheumatoid arthritis would drop. Ulcerative colitis symptoms would drop, and that's an extremely painful disease. And the majority of this is backed up by dozens of studies that have just tested nicotine patches. I often wonder why the pharmaceutical industry doesn't take its nicotine replacement therapies like patches, nicotine gum, and get them approved for other conditions. And I think part of it's just that nicotine can't be patented. You really can't make a lot of money on it. But I think the other thing is that nicotine is so demonized, they just don't want to go there.
It appears to me that the very people that demonized cannabis, now not the same people, but the same trajectory, the same people who demonized alcohol, then demonized cannabis, then demonized psilocybin, that now have flipped on both of those drugs and are very much behind recreational use of cannabis and maybe even psilocybin, are the ones that are actually demonizing nicotine. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think that's a puzzle to a lot of us. The very same people who want to legalize those drugs are all in on the demonization of nicotine, which is ironic because it's already a legal drug, right? It's on the World Health Organization's essential medicines list. It's approved by the Food and Drug Administration, and nicotine patches, nicotine gum, nicotine, and now recently nicotine lozenges and nicotine inhalers are available in every pharmacy over the counter in America and Canada, right? And the FDA says that those products are not dependence forming or subject to abuse. The CDC is full on with those products, pointing out that they don't cause cancer, don't cause heart disease, don't cause lung disease. And actually the CDC calls them medical nicotine. It's the same pharmaceutical grade nicotine that's used in nicotine vapes and nicotine pouches. There's not a lot of logical thinking going on right now in the field of tobacco control.
So how does any of this square with the fear machine around nicotine?
Well, the fear machine we have the end result of several decades of tobacco control messaging, so that now 80% of American physicians believe that nicotine causes cancer and heart disease and lung disease because they used these words as synonyms: tobacco, smoking, nicotine, as if it's all the same thing. So if 4 out of 5 doctors are that profoundly misinformed. Think about the public and what are those doctors telling the public? What does the public think or know? Well, it's interesting that the FDA has been talking about how, yes, we know that the public is, in fact, I think there's one quote from Brian King saying 90% of the public is misinformed about nicotine. Okay, well, what are you going to do about it? Their concern is that they want adult smokers to be better informed. That, okay, nicotine is not the thing that kills you. It's all the other crap that's in cigarette smoke. But they want to make sure that teens don't hear that. That's their concern. And I think there's some interesting ethical issues around truth-telling that aren't really being explored and should be explored by a bioethicist there. We want to tell adults the truth, but we don't want teens to learn that. And to kind of let that sink in.
Mm. Ja. Och det är mycket som återstår. Man har ju gjort forskning till en viss del, så det finns många som blir väldigt intresserade och forskar inom sitt område. Det är bra för Parkinson eller Alzheimers eller epilepsi och sådana här. Men det var kul att få en lite mer samlad bild. Och vi i Sverige, vi är ju världsbäst på att inte röka. Det är rätt coolt.
Ja, idag är vi det. Det har inte varit så alltid.
Nej. Och där får vi väl tacka snuset faktiskt. Och det gjordes en väldigt bra dokumentärfilm som heter How Sweden Quit Smoking. Som man kan kolla på YouTube. Och jag har faktiskt med ett klipp här med några ur den här dokumentären. Så jag kör den.
And there are still too many people who think that it's nicotine that is the dangerous thing in a cigarette. It's not.
It has lots of effect on the human mind, and that's why people like it. And it's addictive, which is of course annoying, but it's not really dangerous with nicotine. It's a pesticide. I find that interesting. The plant produces nicotine to be protected against insects.
If you believe, or anybody out there believe, nicotine causes cancer, I ask you, please Google the question, does nicotine in itself cause cancer? ? And you will find the answer from the World Health Organization, no, it does not. You will find the answer from the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, in the America. It will say,
nicotine doesn't cause cancer.
So nicotine is probably even good for some people, but the smoke definitely is dangerous. It causes lung disease, it ages the skin, that's very apparent. You look older after a while, using cigarettes on a regular basis, and somehow that also links to increased risk for cardiac and cardiovascular disease.
The other products, I mean, being the e-cigarettes or the heat-not-burn or snus or tobacco pouches, are much less harmful because you don't get all the tar that you would get from cigarettes. If the rest of European Union were to use snus and nicotine in the same way as Sweden, there are 255,000 per year fewer that would die in the European Union. I mean, it's a lot of people. You know?
It's 10 million people during those 3 decades. That's quite a lot. And it's hard to admit that you have been responsible for that.
They just made a survey among EU members of parliament. And it turns out that 25 or 30% of the members of parliament thought e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches were just as dangerous as cigarettes. This means they are not aware, or they might believe nicotine is causing cancer and death.
I've been a doctor for more than 3 decades now, treating patients all the time, and I've seen so many times that people stop to smoke and they start to use snus instead. And there is nothing wrong with that from a metabolical point of view that I can detect as a doctor. So I'm just fed up with all the people that say, oh, it's not good, you still use snus, you're addicted and so on, that's still dangerous. And I always ask myself, so where is the science to back up that statement? And I haven't found any.
Unfortunately, as it were, for the people that are against harm reduction, it doesn't cause cancer.
There are some reports that are actually saying that nicotine in some cases are actually doing good for you.
It's been a tradition among Swedish football players a long time ago. Ralf Edström, who scored against West Germany in 1974 World Cup, he was very fond of snus.
And actually there is one publication now that's very recently been done in trained archers. So they had placebo nicotine or correct nicotine in the bloodstream during shooting bow. And actually it was shown that compared to placebo, they hit higher scores with nicotine in the bloodstream. So it makes perfect sense if you're a professional footballer that it might have an enhancing effect on your ability to score.
Can we in any way tolerate nicotine as we do with caffeine?
But you get addicted to coffee as well, and that's still allowed. I gave you coffee. You didn't say no. Caffeine is also addictive. And it's, interestingly enough, it has similar effects to those on nicotine. You get peppier, more focused and all that. Isn't that correct? That's what people say when they smoke a cigarette or use snus.
And as we do in some parts of the world with cannabis today.
It's very strange, and I mean, you can go to Netherlands, you can go to a coffee shop and you can smoke marijuana, but you are not allowed to put one of those under your lip because the sign said no tobacco allowed. And that's the most rebellious thing you can do as a Swede. Go to Amsterdam and put a snus under your lip in a coffee shop.
I did a study 5 years ago into the random sample of Swedes, asking about dependence to tobacco and coffee, and found that the average tobacco user is somewhat more dependent than the average caffeine user. But how many have a very strong dependence to these two drugs in the society? The absolute number of caffeine users was 70-75%, while smoking was around 6%. So in Sweden, dependence to caffeine is more of a problem than dependence to nicotine, and that we don't pay much attention or we don't care.
If smoking cigarettes has a risk of 100%, you find snus, e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches down in the very, very, very lower end of the scale, comparable to nicotine replacement products, which are advertised freely in every nation's TV. Nicotine patches, nicotine chewing gum, etc.
The product that the healthcare has doesn't give people the kick that they need and that they usually get from their cigarettes or whatever they use.
Usually when you get addicted to any drug, it's very important how fast it acts. If you smoke a cigarette, the nicotine reaches your brain within 10 to 20 seconds. It's extremely fast. It's as fast as if you would give it intravenously. Actually, there have been some trials suggesting that if you start vaping instead from the first time you use nicotine in either smoking or vaping, there's less risk that you get addicted if you use the vaping method because it doesn't have any effect on your brain until about, say, like 10 minutes rather than 10 seconds.
That has changed consumption. And that has given more people the possibility to have something else than cigarettes to give them the kick.
Further and further parts of the Swedish society have more or less completely stopped smoking in favor of using another product that perhaps is not a health product, but it doesn't kill you, it doesn't cause cancer, it is very marginal from a public health perspective and really ought not be an issue at all, especially considering the benefits that can be realized.
Det blir ju mycket information här, men
Ja.
jag rekommenderar ändå tittarna att gå in och kolla på den här dokumentären How Sweden Quit Smoking.
Ja.
Det är intressant. Man kanske inte tänker på det som svensk, att vi är bäst i världen på att inte röka.
Och hur hamnar vi där?
Ja, precis.
Ja.
Och nu ska vi se på ett klipp där han förklarar lite mer ingående om den här studien då från Harvard 2015 som man gjorde och försökte få djur då beroende, men det gick inte.
And if you didn't know this, this is phenomenal. Hey, Charlie, do you think anybody out there knows anybody with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ulcerative colitis, hypothyroidism, arthritis out there in your audience has these things?
Yep, plenty.
Did you know that, let's just destroy this narrative for all of them. Did you know that nicotine patches are published as cures for all of those I just mentioned?
No.
What about autism? Do you know anybody in the world that has autism or autistic adults now? Did you know they have studies that nicotine patches can reverse the aggressive nature and antisocial behavior of an autistic kid in 7 days?
Really?
That's interesting. How many of your loved ones that have Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia of any kind, depression, hypothyroidism, thyroid hormone imbalance, ulcerative colitis, arthritis, and autism, how many of them have ever been told or prescribed nicotine patches?
None.
Nicotine is not addictive. And Harvard University proved it in 2015. And when they figured out they couldn't make any animals addicted to nicotine when they've been told their whole life that nicotine's addictive, they did FOIA requests with the FDA, and the FDA sent them all R&D, research and development papers for the tobacco giants since 1970. Guess what Harvard found in those papers? That the tobacco industry knew from the 1970s that nicotine wasn't addictive and that their products were not addictive. So they hired marketing consultants and chemists to come in, and the chemists that were involved told them, if you will just add pyrazines, a man-made chemical, to the tobacco product, anything a human consumes will be addicted.
Correct.
Or addictive. So pyrazines, there's currently right now the FDA allows 13 different pyrazines in every tobacco product, but they still don't tell you pyrazines make it addictive. They only tell you nicotine does, but nicotine doesn't do it. Nicotine has never been addictive. And for anybody out there wondering, if I try these nicotine patches to help me, is it going to work? Am I going to get addicted to it? No, you won't. Not a single human's ever been addicted to nicotine patches. Ever, never, ever, ever, ever. In fact, in this study that I mentioned from January 2023, the authors actually made a note to this. They said, we know that most of the world believes that nicotine's addictive. We have found not a single one of our patients in this study ever had the dependency for nicotine patches after they stopped. They never once thought they needed it, wanted to take it, had night sweats, had withdrawal symptoms of any kind, and they said, this is not to be expected. Charlie, did you know that tobacco plants are not the only plant that has nicotine in it?
Go on. I didn't know.
Did you know that the second highest plant on earth with nicotine in it is eggplants?
Really?
Yeah. Did you know the third highest containing nicotine plant on earth is red tomatoes?
Really?
Did you know that green tomatoes have 10 times more nicotine than a red tomato?
I didn't know.
Did you know that celery, cauliflower, bell peppers, white potatoes all have nicotine in them? Did you know every nightshade vegetable like zucchini, squashes, all of them have nicotine in them?
No.
Did you know that they actually just reversed last year brain tumors using nicotine alone? Did you know they took glioblastomas, the most common brain tumor on earth, and in 72 hours could dissolve the whole brain tumor with just nicotine?
Really?
Yeah, really. Did you know, I mentioned here, you can reverse Parkinson's, autism. Did you know that they published recently that Parkinson's can be slowed or reversed just by eating food that has nicotine in it? Did you know that smokers that are identical twins, they've already published these studies for the whole world. They've actually taken identical twins all around the world, and they surveyed them all. They wanted to know how many of them have developed Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS. Did you know the only identical twin that never got Parkinson's was the smokers.
Wow. Yeah.
And supposedly this is a genetic disorder. Genetic. But they're identical twins.
Mm-hmm.
So how is the identical twin not getting the genetic disease? Nicotine is the protective agent in those that are smoking and using snuff or using dip or whatever. Yeah. You don't need to smoke. I don't really like smoking, but nicotine patches, gum pouches, you need to look at this. This is a huge win. And I will just tell you guys, I was asked to go to LA this weekend and actually present how nicotine is a nutrient and it heals the body and can prevent and recover people even from the most recent pandemic.
Jag tycker det är fantastiskt. Alltså jag visste inte det innan vi började texta dem med.
Nej. Och en grej som jag tyckte var väldigt intressant är att 1994 så samlar de ju de här höjdarna, tobakscheferna som får vittna i kongressen. Och då frågar ju liksom den här snubben, de i tur och ordning så här, om de tror att nikotin är beroendeframkallande. Och alla svarar ju nej. Och efter det så har ju folk sagt nej men de bara ljuger. Sådana är de i tobaksindustrin. Men tänk om de visste. Tänk om de faktiskt visste att nikotin, att det är de andra grejerna som de blandar i. Då är de liksom rätt cyniska kan man ju tycka. Men jag har det klippet också här från kongressen 94.
Let me ask you first, and I'd like to just go down the row, whether each of you believes that nicotine is not addictive. I heard virtually all of you touch on it, and just yes or no. Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no, and again, time is short. If you could just... I think each of you believe nicotine is not addictive. We just would like to have this for the record.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
Dr. Campbell, I assume that you're aware that your testimony, and you said in your testimony that nicotine is not addictive, is contradicted by an overwhelming number of authorities and associations. For example, in 1988, the Surgeon General of the United States wrote an entire report on this topic. The Surgeon General, of course, is the chief health advisor to our government. I assume you have reviewed that report?
Yes, I have, sir.
All right.
Så det är lite motsägelsefullt allting.
Och alltså jag kan ju förstå att de inte vill att det här ska vara synligt.
Nej. Och jag tänker att hålla på och reglera de här nikotinprodukterna, det är ju ett sätt att kanske hjälpa cigarettindustrin. Jag vet inte. De borde ju egentligen förbjuda allt vad rökning heter. För det är just förbränningen som skapar alla de här hundratals med kemiska ämnena som man inte ska blanda i. Men Dr. Ardis, han pratar ju förut också om att det är ju sådana här pyrrusiner då. Som de har blandat i sedan 70-talet som gör att vi blir så fruktansvärt torsk på just cigaretter kombinerat med nikotinet. Och där är också ett klipp lite på vad är pyrrusiner egentligen.
Now, let's shed light on a less known but equally harmful component of cigarettes, pyrazines. Pyrazines, you might ask? Yes, pyrazines. These are organic compounds that are commonly found in various foods and beverages, imparting flavors ranging from nutty to bell pepper-like. But what's more intriguing, or rather alarming, is their role in the world of tobacco. Tobacco manufacturers are known to use additives like pyrazines to enhance the appeal of their products, particularly light cigarettes. How so? Well, these compounds help optimize nicotine delivery and dosing. This means they make it easier for the nicotine to reach your brain, boosting the addictive potential of the cigarette. But the role of pyrazines doesn't stop there. They also play a significant role in cueing and learned behavior. This means they can trigger cravings and reinforce smoking habits, making it even harder for smokers to quit. In essence, pyrazines are like the hidden puppeteers in the world of tobacco, pulling the strings behind the scenes. They help make cigarettes more addictive and appealing, all while remaining relatively unknown to the general public. To give you a clearer picture, imagine a sly magician who uses misdirection to perform his tricks. While you're focused on the nicotine, the pyrazines are busy at work, enhancing the addictive effects of the cigarette and reinforcing your smoking habits. So, while nicotine often gets the spotlight when it comes to the harmful effects of smoking, it's important to remember that it's not the only player in the game. Pyrazines also play a significant role in the addictive nature of cigarettes, and thus, they deserve equal attention. As you can see, pyrazines are a hidden danger in cigarettes that you should not overlook. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about what you're up against, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions about your health. Nicotine and pyrazines, a dangerous duo that ramps up the addiction potential of every cigarette you smoke. Now, you're probably wondering how these two substances work hand in hand. Well, let's dive into that, shall we? Nicotine, as we've discussed, is the primary addictive substance in tobacco. It's the culprit behind the immediate feel-good sensation, the rush that smokers often seek. But nicotine's role doesn't stop there. It also primes the brain to be more receptive to other addictive substances, setting the stage for pyrazines to step in. Pyrazines, on the other hand, are additives used by tobacco manufacturers. They're there not just to enhance the flavor, but to optimize nicotine delivery and dosing. Essentially, they make sure that every puff you take delivers just the right amount of nicotine to keep you coming back for more. But here's the kicker. Pyrazines also play a significant role in cueing and learned behavior. It's these sensory cues, the smell, the taste, the sensation of smoke in your lungs, that become deeply ingrained in the smoker's psyche. The brain starts associating these cues with the pleasure of smoking, creating a powerful psychological dependency. So it's not just the nicotine that keeps you hooked, it's the interplay between nicotine and pyrazines, this potent duo that makes each cigarette so addictive. Nicotine provides the immediate pleasure and primes the brain, while pyrazines ensure optimal nicotine delivery and create sensory cues that lead to a psychological dependency. It's a clever yet insidious strategy that tobacco companies have perfected over the years. They've managed to create a product that's not just addictive on a chemical level, but one that also taps into our sensory experiences and psychological tendencies. So next time you think about lighting up, remember the potent duo of nicotine and pyrazines that are keeping you hooked. Knowledge is power, and it's time for you to use that power to make a difference. When we peel back the layers of what we think we know, we often find a complex web of truths hidden beneath the surface. As we've discovered today, the world of cigarettes is no different. It's not just about nicotine. There are other players in this game of smoke and mirrors, such as pyrazines, that contribute to the allure and addiction of smoking. It's important to understand that while we've been led to believe that nicotine is the main villain, it's not acting alone. It's a team effort, with pyrazines playing a significant role in heightening the appeal of light cigarette products and reinforcing addictive behaviors. The more we know about these hidden elements, the better equipped we are to address the issue at its roots. Now, it's one thing to know this information, but it's another to share it. And that's where you come into play. We're not just talking about the dangers of smoking here. We're talking about a broader awareness. We're talking about understanding the hidden dynamics that make smoking so hard to quit. And we're talking about how this understanding can help us develop more effective strategies to combat smoking addiction. So let's take this knowledge and do something with it. Talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues. Use your social media platforms to spread the word. Start conversations about the often overlooked aspects of smoking addiction, like the role of pyrazines. You never know who might be listening, who might be struggling, and who might find the strength to quit because of what you've shared.
Men han är ju inne på lite mer då att nikotin också är verkligen beroendeframkallande jämfört med de här andra doktorerna så att säga.
Men de jobbar väl ihop också. Det är väl som ett hjälpämne. För att som jag har fattat det så att ett naturligt nikotin tar ungefär 10 minuter att gå ut i kroppen. Men i och med de här pyrosinerna då så kickar det igång nikotinet med en gång. Så att ja, det är nog mycket läskiga grejer där som de har blandat i. Ja, men då är vi framme vid den trevligare delen där vi ska titta på vad man faktiskt uträttar med hjälp av nikotin. Så tänkte vi börjar och kika på det här med epilepsi. Eller nej?
Nej.
Lungsjukdom, och det är ju motsägelsefullt med. Alltså,
rökning.
Det var väl på 80-talet det stod att det orsakade cancer och grejer, och sedan gjorde man studier så visade att det inte var fallet. Men det är ju fräckt att man faktiskt kan använda nikotin mot lungsjukdomar.
Well, it sounds like the exact opposite of what you should do. Use a drug found in cigarette smoke to fight lung disease.
But that's just what doctors are doing by testing nicotine against a certain type of hard-to-diagnose lung problem. CBS2's Dr. Max Gomez tells us how it works.
That's right. You know, sarcoidosis is a lung disease that mimics other lung problems, from pneumonia to scar tissue to even lung cancer. So you would think that a nicotine patch normally used to help smokers quit isn't a great idea. Turns out it brings relief to those lung patients. Jose Serra needed a CAT scan after falling on some ice. That's when his doctor noticed a spot on his lung that he was worried could be cancer.
The result was that it was no cancer. Good news. The other news was sarcoidosis. It was the final diagnosis.
Sarcoidosis is a growth of inflammatory cells, most likely triggered by inhaling things like pesticides. Left untreated, it can cause severe lung damage and even death. Unlike most lung diseases, the main symptom isn't shortness of breath, but crippling fatigue. Jose says he was drinking 3 energy drinks just to make it through the day. His doctor prescribed a steroid, but the side effects were harsher than the disease itself.
We can't use them for very long before these side effects occur, and they can be very severe, such as the development of diabetes or high blood pressure and complications relating to those, osteoporosis, cataracts, etc.
Instead, Dr. Elliot Krauser at the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center decided to test something that sounds counterintuitive. Use nicotine patches, normally used to help people quit smoking, as a treatment for a lung disease, sarcoidosis.
We're hoping that people will actually get a secondary benefit. Not only will their lung disease get better, but they'll also feel more energized and be able to get up and go.
Results from the initial clinical trial were promising, so Dr. Krauser is now doing a larger randomized trial, exploring if nicotine patches can be a long-term solution to not only help patients feel better, but reverse the progression of the disease. Now, it's not entirely clear how nicotine works, but we now know that nicotine is an anti-inflammatory drug without the side effect of steroids. We also know that nicotine is a stimulant, causing adrenaline to be released in the body, which may account for its fatigue-fighting effects. But you don't want to use that unless you need it in sarcoidosis, because it is highly addictive.
Of course. Dr. Max, thanks.
It's highly addictive.
Ja.
Alltså det är som att de måste säga det fort man pratar om nikotin liksom.
Precis.
Ja, men då kan vi köra den krampen nu då. Jag såg fel här.
I like to play anything on the park. I like to run, I like to play, I like to go on the slide or go on the swing.
We started noticing them when she was about 2, but they weren't convulsions, so we weren't really sure what they were. She only would seize at night, and she would have between 10 and 25 visible seizures. That's not including all the subclinical seizures that she was having also. She'd wake up tired every morning, dark circles under her eyes.
We do not know exactly why it is exclusively happening during sleep, but generally speaking, we think that it has something to do with brain regulation.
We went through so much testing. She's had hundreds of hours of EEGs. She's had MRIs, PET scans, SPECT scans. And it was determined that they could not figure that she was having a seizure coming from any one given area. We tried probably 7 different anticonvulsant medications. None of them worked. We tried the ketogenic diet. It didn't work. It was difficult.
Her diagnosis was a very, very rare genetic disorder called autosomal dominant nocturnal frontal lobe epilepsy. In abbreviation, we call it ADNFLE. Very rare disease. I had really no experience exactly with the same diagnosis, same situation. I started looking up in the literature, and then I found a paper which is very, very interesting. This was published in one of the epilepsy journal, and it was on adult. The treating physician, after trying every single medication they tried, nicotine patch. And the idea was very similar. Okay, there may be some lack of nicotine function. Maybe we should supply.
So we decided we were going to try her on nicotine in the form of the patch, of course. And this had never been done before with a child. We didn't know how much to give her.
We had to go through a few try and error, and then finally we decided that maybe smaller size.
I gave her actually a 1/16 of a patch, and it worked. And she's been doing that for about 3 months now.
So what happened with Karen is that since we started using nicotine patch, number 1, her seizure stopped. Number 2, she could sleep through the night so that she's kind of rested and fresh in the morning. 3, actually there's a little bit of residual effect of nicotine helping with her memory.
No kid wants to wake up in the early morning when you say it's time for school, but she'll say, I'm tired, and then she'll just get up and get dressed and she's fine, and I don't see the dark circles anymore. And she makes it all the way to bedtime and beyond without a nap, so I know that it's working.
When people with epilepsy come to us, we try to find the cause of epilepsy and try to come up with a solution that really distinguishes us from everybody else, every other centers in the state or in the country. And there are truly very few centers that has every components that we have on this campus.
This means that we can move to a small town in the Rockies, which is happening in a couple of days. This is something we could not have done. We had to stay near a big metropolis as long as she had this condition and we didn't know how to treat it. But now we know how to treat it. So we're going to move forward with our life. Very good.
Och så det måste ju vara helt underbart för dem.
Mm. Ja, jag har ju kompisar som... Jag har en dotter som har epilepsi. Hon får ju sådana kramper, så att hon är helt slut i flera dagar. Ligger hon bara... Jag fattar att det är tärande. Och det är häftigt att se också hur brett det är. Många olika typer av sjukdomar man kan hjälpa med nikotin.
Det är helt magiskt. Det känns som en universal. Verkligen. Alltså, man har ju egentligen ingenting att förlora, känner jag. Alltså, plåstret i sig är inte farligt.
Nej.
Det är bara att ta det några dagar och sluta.
Men det känns som de här sjukdomarna som de testar på, det får vara väldigt så här, ovanliga sjukdomar för att de verkligen ska pröva allt som finns. Det känns inte lika vanligt med de här vanliga som det finns läkemedel till på samma sätt.
Nej.
Så har vi tics. Det är ju intressant också. De är också en dotter.
A deep dive into the peer-reviewed scientific literature shows that nicotine outside of cigarettes can have positive effects on depression, high blood pressure, brain function, obesity, Parkinson's, and a variety of other issues, including Tourette syndrome, which affects up to 10% of children.
My daughter was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome when she was 6. To watch our child having these uncontrollable tics, it's painful to watch. These movements or this breathing, it's terrifying, you know, for you as a parent.
We saw our daughter really suffer. She suffered. She would scratch herself bloody, and she just couldn't stop, and she would cry because it hurt. And we watched her suffer like that.
And it was Christmas 2 years ago, and her ticks were so unbelievably bad that, I panicked. And so I started hitting Google, just trying. It was actually at night, and I was panicking. And in Google, I found this one tiny little story about a study they did in the late 90s, where they tried using a 7 milligram nicotine patch on children with Tourette's. The study said all of the children reduced their Tourette's by half. So I said, I'm going to buy a patch right now. And I went to the store and I said, we'll put it on in the morning. And my sister-in-law actually found a German version of the story, which went into more detail. And they said, use the patch at night.
I had a choice to make, to watch her suffer like this, or to put a little patch on her.
So we put on the patch, and the next morning, there were no ticks. It was almost that instantaneous. When a child realizes that other people notice their ticks
and watch them,
and now they're aware that their classmates are watching, and this nicotine patch, in 24 hours, markedly different. And then over time, as they got less and less, nobody noticed in class anymore. Nobody asked, why do you keep making these noises that are bothering everybody?
Yeah, she completely came out of her shell. It very simply made her life easier, 100 times easier. She's socializing. She has friends. She didn't socialize before. She was embarrassed and afraid to go out to meet kids, have a slumber party, to sleep over at other kids' houses.
Just recently, my daughter looked at me and she said, I'm not using the patch anymore. She says, my ticks are almost gone. I didn't need it, so I stopped wearing it. And all those things you'd think, like me as a parent, I would have thought, I need to wean her off of this patch. We need to go slow. But she says, I've been off for 2 weeks. I said, did you notice anything? She goes, no, I just stopped wearing it. I didn't feel anything, no withdrawal symptoms or anything crazy like that. And she used the patch and it worked for her. Nicotine gave us our daughter back.
We're doing a lot more with nicotinic stuff than just what I've told you. So like I said, we're investigating in late life depression. We're as a potential adjunct to antidepressants, MCI, early Alzheimer's disease, HIV, Down syndrome, patients with cancer, chemotherapy, other cognitive problems that occur subsequent to medical treatment or to other diseases. Nicotine. Yeah.
So nicotine increases brain function for millions of people around the world. Switching from cigarettes to a safer delivery method for taking nicotine was estimated to reduce hundreds of millions of early deaths this century. We calculated the potential lives impacted with all these medical conditions. Not just cancer, but Alzheimer's, obesity, anxiety, depression. The number was over 2 billion. Nicotine has benefits for people. Why is this conversation shrouded in doubt? Why are these people subjected to shame? How can we pretend that this is not a human rights issue?
Alltså jag blir så rörd över den där, fantastiskt.
Ja.
Den här tjejen här i början där. Alltså, vilken grej.
Och så enkel lösning på sådana här problem. Så, och det var ju lite intressant, för jag hade ju en diskussion för ett tag sedan med Danneman, Fritjofs kompis. Och vi pratade om snus och bra att snusa, för han har ju tics. Så att hans tics blir liksom mycket bättre. Och jag frågade faktiskt han om man kunde ge en liten förklaring inför det här klippet då. Så han gav mig en liten kort video.
Det jag kan säga med att snusa, det lindrar ticsen. Det är helt uppenbart. Det borde forskarna forska i. Det är nikotinet i det som gör att det lindras. Och om jag inte snusar så blir jag liksom, åker tungan ut så här och liksom, ja. Och så får jag ryckningar och lite så här, ja, såna här grejer liksom. det kommer bara utan att jag själv märker, utan det är folk andra som ser det och det kan uppfattas som konstigt och störande. Men det kommer och går det där med ticsen. Ibland är det värre, ibland är det mindre. Jag vet inte vad det beror på, men snuset hjälper mig att lindra ticsen helt enkelt och det känns skönt och jag blir mer avslappnad av snuset.
Underbart.
Det behöver inte vara krångligare.
Nej.
Man undrar hur många läkare och medicinare som känner till de här grejerna.
Ja, det ska vara kul att veta. Vet de om det, men vägrar berätta om det? Kan det vara så? Eller vet de inte alls?
Nej, det känns som det är lite dolt. Och så kommer vi in på det här med minnet. Det verkar ju också hjälpa otroligt.
Helping your brain with a patch on the Health Watch. A new study is getting underway to determine if a patch used to help people stop smoking may also improve memory.
Health reporter Stephanie Stahl joins us now with more on the research.
Sounds pretty intriguing, doesn't it, guys? You know, there is currently no FDA-approved medication to treat memory loss, which often happens as people age. And while there's a lot of research underway looking for new therapies, one treatment might be something already being used to treat a dangerous addiction.
More than 8 million Americans have mild cognitive impairment, a condition that affects memory and other thinking skills. It's often a precursor to Alzheimer's disease. There's preliminary evidence that nicotine patches might be able to help.
Nicotine stimulates parts of the brain that are important for memory loss and seem to be involved in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease and other similar conditions. We think that nicotine may act to actually enhance the activity of those systems in a way that makes people's attention and memory sharper.
Dr. Paul Newhouse is the national director of the MIND study. It's the largest and longest running study of its kind testing a nicotine patch, the same thing that's used to help people stop smoking.
One of the advantages of using a patch is that it gets around all the negative effects of inhaling. So there's no addiction liability, there's none of the lung damage that we see with smoking or vaping.
A preliminary study with 74 patients using a patch showed improvements.
We found that nicotine enhanced memory and attention functioning in those patients with no significant or serious side effects. And we were able to convince the NIH that this was really worth testing in a much larger sample in a national study.
And so now they are recruiting 300 volunteers over the age of 55 at 29 sites around the country. Locally, the nicotine study is being done at Lehigh Hospital and Hershey Medical Center. And while it might be tempting to try this on your own, doctors say that is not advised. We have a lot more information and the links for people who might be interested. CBSPhilly.com, click on Health.
Check it out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steph.
Det är lite märkligt att det inte finns mer alltså dokumentärer och forskning om de här grejerna. Man hittar lite klipp utspritt så här och där, men jag har hittat en dokumentär som finns på Rumble. Den heter någonting med nikotin. Den var väldigt intressant faktiskt. Kommer inte ihåg vad den heter exakt nu, men det var minnesförlust det här gällde och då har vi ju Alzheimers och Parkinson som vi kan kika på här.
It is widely known that smoking cigarettes increases your chances of lung cancer, heart disease, and early death. And by now, most of us know that nicotine is the culprit that leads to the addiction to cigarettes. But here's what you may not know. As Ursula Perry reports, there's growing evidence that nicotine may actually have some surprising benefits.
When Reese Dean started to experience changes in his mood, he never thought it would lead to a diagnosis of mild cognitive decline, the early stages of dementia.
He's very irritable and explosive almost at times.
Then his wife saw a flyer for the MIND study, which stands for Memory Improvement Through Nicotine Dosing.
What nicotine does is it imitates the action of a normally occurring chemical in the brain that's important for signaling. It's called acetylcholine.
Acetylcholine is important for learning, memory, and attention.
And nicotine can help imitate the actions of acetylcholine when it's being degraded by Alzheimer's disease.
Dr. Newhouse treated 74 patients and with the skin patch version of nicotine on a daily basis for 6 months. He saw improvements in attention and memory. But with nicotine having a reputation for being bad for your health, could it really be good for your brain?
Well, I'm an ex-smoker, so why do I want to put nicotine back in my system? Because that would make me want to crave a cigarette.
And the answer seems to be that if you give it through the skin, you don't have any of those kinds of problems.
Dr. Newhouse has not seen any habit-forming problems in his patients. And Marianne, who doesn't know whether her husband got the patch or the placebo in the ongoing study, says she got her husband back.
Dr. Newhouse says that this is not an endorsement for smoking.
Ja, häftigt.
Ja, det.
Så det får vi hoppas, om vi ger det här lite uppmärksam så kanske fler hakar på och vill göra program och dokumentärer. Och, ja.
Det är värt, och jag tänker, har man ett problem som de beskriver, och man kan ju googla själv också. Men du har fått fram många klipp, jag har hjälpt till att texta. Och vi anser ju att det är magiskt. Varken du eller jag visste väl om det här tidigare, eller hur?
Nej, det var några få grejer jag kände till, men inte att det var så brett liksom. Det var häftigt. Man hör ju nästan alltid bara negativ information om nikotin. Det är så beroendeframkallande och dåligt. Och, men i sin rätta form, om man äter det, så är det ju, vi har nikotinreceptorer som är mottagliga för de här grejerna. Man ser det kan reparera minne och grejer.
Ja, som när det gäller att det fanns i mat, det hade jag faktiskt ingen aning om. Det var helt, jag blev helt, va? Äter vi nikotin? Alltså.
Ja. Och så vissa såna här, som att det är 10 gånger mer nikotin i gröna tomater än i röda tomater.
Ja.
Så att,
gröna är inga goda.
Mycket ny information, och jag tänker att mycket av de här skadliga grejerna, det blandar ju, dels är det besprutning, så att odlar man en egen naturtobak utan att den besprutas så hårt som den konventionella tobaken gör, så får man ett mycket snällare, även om själva inandningen i sig tror jag är ett stort problem, i och med att du får i dig kolväten och såna här grejer. Det är ju cancerogent i sig själv. Men jag började ju odla tobak, och det var intressant, för det, gör man det själv och tar hand om de här grejerna och sedan gör liksom ett hälsosnus på det, helt giftfritt. Jag vill inte ha några av de här kemikalierna som de blandar i fabrikerna, utan jag har gjort en sån snuskurs nu, helt giftfri, som man kan anmäla sig till, och jag har en liten kort 1 minuters klipp här. Vill du lära dig hur du gör eget giftfritt ekologiskt snus utan tillsatser och bekämpningsmedel? Anmäl dig till min videoutbildning. Steg för steg får du lära dig hur du tar hand om din naturtobak. Från sådd till skörd, från kurering till snustillverkning. I kursen använder vi en gammal tobakssort som heter bondtobak, eller Nicotina rustica, som är en nikotinstark sort. Vill du anmäla dig, skicka ett PM på Facebook eller smsa ditt namn till 0769 42 01 11. Kursen kostar 300 kronor. Då får du personlig handledning och tips på allt du behöver veta. I kursen ingår 5 delar. 1. Fröer och sådd. Fröerna skickar jag gratis, men du betalar portot. 2. Omplantering. 3. Utplantering plus allmänna skötselråd. 4. Skördning och kurering. Och 5. Snustillverkning.
Fantastiskt.
Ja.
Det är bra,
absolut.
bra verkligen.
Ja. Jag tycker alla borde börja odla sina egna grejer oavsett om det är tobak eller vad det är. Så,
Ja, man kan väl odla på balkonger kanske, eller?
Ja.
Funkar det, tror du?
Du kan nog odla i krukor och absolut hinkar. Och, så att lite grann blir det ju. Ja, du kan tänka de gör sina miljardvinster, de här stora tobaksbolagen, och så håller de nu på att förbjuda olika örter och läkemedelsklassar örter. Och de får fortsätta och producera de här cigaretterna. Och nu vill de ju sänka vitamindoserna i vitaminerna. Alltså varför ge sig inte på jättarna istället?
Nej, jag har köpt jättestarka vitaminer för att de vill ju ge oss för lite.
Ja, och det står lungcancerfall är 50-50, rökare, icke-rökare. Det kanske inte folk tror. Ja, det är faktiskt väldigt, väldigt många människor som får sån här, vad heter det, andrahands passiv rökning. Blir sjuka. Så att det är för varje rökare som kan sluta så är det ju en tjänst för samhället. Men vi är duktiga i alla fall som är världsbäst på att inte röka.
Ja, det är. Och det är frågan om det är bra eller inte. Ja. Finns det plåster som tillverkas av rent ekologiskt nikotin helt utan tillsatser? Tillsatser vet jag inte vad de har för i. Ekologiskt tveksamt, men vad vet du något om den?
Nej, jag försökte att kolla lite på det här, vad som krävs för att få liksom göra nikotinplåster så. Men det är ett par företag, de gör liksom allt. Det är Nicorette och de här. Så jag vet inte hur lagstiftningen är där. Men när de har gjort studier där vi såg så har det ju inte blivit mer än, man kan bli lite irriterad, men så är det ju med niacin också, vitamin B3, det får man ju en liten kapillärrusning. Många tror ju att det är en allergi, men det är ju liksom en naturlig process. Så att man får inte vara för känslig heller, utan blir det lite rött på huden så gör det inte så mycket. Ja, det är ju lätt att tänka att man är allergisk och att det inte är bra och så, men ja. För det var ju problemet när de tillverkade det gamla niacinet som ger kapillärrusning. Då trodde ju, i och med att de blandade i det här i multivitaminer och sånt där sen också, så fick man ju liten kapillärrusning. Då trodde folk att de blev allergiska, men det är ju en naturlig reaktion på niacinet. Och efter det så kom de ju på lite billigare varianter av niacin då, nikotinamid, som inte ger den här kapillärrusningen då. Men,
ja, det är en hel vetenskap. Verkligen.
Har du fått några intressanta kommentarer då?
Jag har lagt upp lite här och där, men just nu vet jag inte om vi har någon rätt. Så. Ja, den här kanske. Oj, nu gjorde vi samtidigt.
Klickar vi samtidigt?
Ja.
Jag undrar
jag
om
vet inte den.
Nej, inte jag heller faktiskt.
Ja, den. Du vill
han hänvisar nog till de vanliga, liksom, för han har ju mycket andra grejer som han fokuserar på, läkeväxter och sånt där.
Ja.
Ganska avancerade. Men den här tänkte jag på. Bondtobak odlades semiprofessionellt ända in på 70-talet i Sverige.
Jaha.
Så att,
ser man.
det är en fin gammal tobakssort. Och så jag undrar om det är precis tvärtom. Friska individer är inga bra kunder till vården och Big Pharma. Nej, så är det ju.
Precis, och det är väl därför de vill dölja det också.
Och jag tycker ju såna här, tänk om staten hade delat ut nikotinplåster gratis till hela befolkningen. Varför då? Där har de ju verkligen någonting de skulle kunna göra för att förebygga hälsan liksom.
Men de vill ju inte det. Vi ska ju vara sjuka, Linus.
Ja.
Annars tjänar de inga pengar.
Men jag bara tänker, hur dyrt kan ett plåster vara om man ju nu gör en sån satsning och försöka få...
Ja, precis.
Nu är vi ju redan bäst i världen i Sverige på att inte röka, men...
Men
lite kul tanke.
Jag tycker att det här är verkligen jätteintressant och jag hoppas att folk tar sig tid att studera om man har något av de här problemen som nikotinet säger sig kunna hjälpa. Alltså du har inte mycket att förlora. Det kostar inte jättemycket att köpa ett paket med nikotinplåster. Testa. Och jag menar, kolla fler. Det finns mycket där ute att leta på och lyssna.
Och du blir ju inte gravid. Du får ju inte hjärtinfarkt. Alltså, mig veteligen är den enda biverkningen jag har hört att man kan bli lite röd, flammig på huden. Och det tror jag är en naturlig reaktion liksom till medicin, kapillärrusningen. Ja, men fantastiskt intressant, kul att vi gjorde det här, tycker jag.
Ja, jag med. Jag är jätteglad att få vara delaktig och hjälpt till att få fram texten på. Och du har ju satt upp, det är det enda jag har gjort. Du har ju verkligen ställt i ordning vilken ordning vi skulle köra och så vidare.
Ja. Nej, men det är kul att ha ett sånt här program som man kan hänvisa folk till och så här. Kanske man blir nyfiken och om man har någon av de här symptomen och vågar testa en väldigt snäll vad ska man kalla det, behandling, eller det beror på hur man ser på nikotin. Jag ser det ju som ett näringsämne. I början såg det ju som ett kosttillskott.
Ja, det är jag med nu mer. Men det har det riktigt, riktigt lärorikt. Så att jag hoppas att ni lär er också. Alltså att ni tycker det är intressant. För att,
Yes.
Tack så mycket, Linus. Tack alla
Tack för ikväll. Ja. Tack alla som har kommenterat. Och åk och köp nikotinplåster helt enkelt.
Och gå med i Linus om ni snusar. Gå med i Linus snusskola.
Giftfri, ekologisk, egenodlad snus. Det är fina grejer.